Perfect. Thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed a little bit of interactive time. And now I'd like to pass it over to Sean McHugh, who was an active driver behind the Fair Trade Handbook, and he'll talk a little bit about the book and introduce our speakers today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As Erin mentioned, my name is Sean McHugh, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Canadian Fair Trade Network. We formed in 2011 to bring the Fair Trade movement together nationally, and we've worked to build out the Fair Trade Town campus school, event, workplace, and faith group programs. We published 14 editions of Fair Trade magazine over 7 years, and we've hosted 8 national conferences. More than that, however, we've worked hard to bring people together, create connections, and empower leaders from coast to coast. Overarching to this, the focus of our work has been to increase awareness, understanding, and support for fair trade, and to drive sales and growth within the market in Canada, with the hopes that increased volumes will have a positive impact on those growing and producing. It's been a long road, but I think we are getting somewhere, which has been exciting to see in recent years. The Fair Trade Handbook, Building a Better World Together, for me is really an extension of all of this. The idea was to bring in various writers on a variety of topics to really dig into what this movement is all about, and then share that for others to pick up and hopefully learn from. Fair trade on its surface can seem simple, pay a fair price, but in reality it's incredibly complex, which we'll hear more about from our speakers today. It ties together agriculture, import, export, trade, processing, packaging, retail, distribution, marketing, development, cooperatives, governance, you name it, and it really is involved in some way. And I think that's what makes it so interesting and so unique. The book was broken up into 3 parts. Part 1, Fair Trade in an Unfair World. Part 2, Fair Trade in Action, and Part 3, Pursuing Global Justice. Today we're focusing on Part 2, Fair Trade in Action. And on that note, it is my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. First up, I'd like to introduce Jenny Coleman. Jenny has been the owner-president of EquiFruit since 2013. She combines a lengthy career in business with long-standing social justice roots, set during 2 years volunteer work in Namibia in the mid-90s. She loves fair trade for its pragmatic approach to sustainable business. She loves EquiFruit for, well, the fruit, the farmers, and the fact that something as simple as eating a fair trade banana can have such a positive impact on someone's life and community. On a more personal note, I remember meeting Jenny for the first time. She was new, fresh, and ready to take on the banana world. And while I admired her courage, I also knew it wasn't going to be easy. But here we are all these years later, and fair trade banana sales are through the roof, largely led by Jenny and her team at EquiFruit. So well done. Jenny, if you'd like to say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't think there's anything to add there. We're a small but mighty team. And yeah, I was at an event yesterday for entrepreneurs, and I was telling somebody, they said, how did you get into the banana business? And I said, well, it's because I actually bought this business. And the person says, so you bought a business and you'd had no experience running a business before that? And I was like, yeah, that's why it was kind of tough at the beginning. But we got through those rough years, and there are always going to be rough years as an entrepreneur, but things are looking up. So thank you for that introduction, Sean.
Absolutely. Okay, next up, I'd like to introduce Martin van de Boer. Martin has spent 20 years working as a cooperative developer, serving on several boards and national working groups, and promoting the social and solidarity economy in Cuba and around the world. Martin proudly acts as the ambassador for SPP Global Cooperative, which unites over 300,000 small organized farmers. He currently works as a consultant with various social economy organizations and is building a small coffee roasting workshop on his farm in Western Quebec. And on a more personal note, Martin and I's paths have crisscrossed many times over the years, from his time at La Siembra, at different conferences, even as an introducer and translator at one of our conferences in 2017. Martin, would you like to say a few words?
Thanks, Sean. Hi, everybody. Yeah, well, you mentioned my time at La Siembra. For me, very happy to be here this morning with all of you, with Jennifer, with Jenny. and all the friends that are here. You know, anybody who's worked at La Siembra has had Mandevira in their lives for a very long time. We were saying this in the breakout session, how, you know, La Siembra and Mandevira's destiny were tied together. And so it's great to be here, and I can't wait to hear what everybody has to say and answer your questions. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Next up, Jennifer Williams. For over 20 years, Jennifer has been focused on how business can be an instrument to create a kind, just, and sustainable world. Jennifer worked in microcredit in Northern Ghana with women entrepreneurs in Ottawa, and she was instrumental in the growth of a worker-owned business that pioneered fair trade in Canada. Over the past 7 years, Jennifer has worked as a trusted consultant for ESOP builders, helping companies design and implement employee share ownership plans that suit each company's unique needs and culture. Jennifer is a trusted advisor to companies that have sustainability in their DNA, and co-owns an organic and local home delivery business in Ottawa focused on local and sustainable options. Jennifer has lived and worked in Mexico, El Salvador, Peru, Ghana. She speaks English, French, and Spanish. She is the mother of 4 children, and which keeps her focused on why creating a more sustainable future is so important. And to find balance, she loves hanging out in the forest and swimming. On a more personal note, Jennifer and I worked closely together for many years. She has been involved in various strategic planning sessions at the CFTN and has helped at several national conferences, in sessions, and as a keynote. Beyond that, we have co-organized several trips to Origin and have traveled together to Peru 3 times and to Ecuador and Costa Rica. It's Jennifer, if you'd like to say a few words.
I can't believe in that crazy long bio, there's nothing about dancing. I've also been known to ensure that there's good dancing that goes on at the conferences and in other locations, including the Origin trip. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to see some familiar faces here and new faces. Yeah, that was a really long bio, so I don't think I have anything else to say.
Awesome, thanks. And last but not least, Andres Gonzalez Aguilera. Andres is the founder and the general manager of Mandevira Cooperative. The Mandevira Cooperative in Paraguay has transformed from a group of sugarcane farmers struggling with unfair prices and unjust trading practices into the world's leading producer and exporter of organic and fair trade sugar. Mandevira and its farmer-owned sugar mill are a perfect example of development through fair trade, enabling farmers to take greater control of the value chain, add more value to their final product, and ensure that benefits remain in the community where they belong. On a more personal note, my non-existent Spanish has made communication challenging, but I've always inspired by Andres and what he's been able to accomplish in Paraguay. We also.
Muy buenas tardes. Buenas tardes, Sean. Buenas tardes para Jennifer, Jenny, Martín y todos los que nos están escuchando y viendo. Realmente para mí es un privilegio poder compartir este momento y una parte también de todo lo que ha significado Mandovina y el apoyo que ha recibido del comercio justo, de las organizaciones del comercio justo. Somos un grupo pequeño de productores, pero con grandes ideas, grandes sueños, que con determinación y con mucho trabajo hemos logrado convertir cada crisis que se nos ha presentado en grandes oportunidades. Y estamos aquí después de la pandemia, estamos aquí con una guerra mundial, ¿no? Con la suba del combustible, con todos los problemas, pero seguimos peleando y seguimos dando esperanza a miles de pequeños productores y trabajadores aquí en Arroyo y Estero, Paraguay.
Great, thank you so much, speakers. So I'm going to enter into our question and answer period. But I would like the audience, if you do have any questions or comments to make in the chat, feel free, and we will try to get to those as we go. And really, I'll be asking a couple of questions just to dig in a little bit more to some of the chapters, and also just hear a little bit more from each of our panelists. So question number 1 is for Jenny. And Jenny, in your chapter, you talk about the time it took to create momentum around fair trade bananas. Can you point to that instance when you felt you were at the tipping point where fair trade bananas seemed to be really gaining the traction it needed?
Yeah, thanks, Erin. I think I'm not. That was a good, eloquent start to this webinar. I'm not sure if we've hit the tipping point yet. I think we're just about there. But I think that a major milestone for us occurred just after that book went to publication. So I remember hinting at it at the end of the chapter, but it didn't come to fruition until after I'd submitted my text. Okay, so the point is that in about 18 months ago, Longo's, a Toronto area grocery store, about 35 stores in the Toronto area, made a full commitment to fair trade bananas. 100% commitment on both conventional and organic fair trade bananas. And every customer we'd had before that had only bought fair trade organic, which is great. And, you know, we are thankful for that business. And of course, you know, in the pecking order, there's nothing better than a fair trade organic banana. But let's not forget that, you know, 90 or 85% of the market is conventional bananas. And conventional banana producers, and more particularly their workers, are really in a much more precarious situation. And it's really the fight over conventional bananas that is going to win the fair trade battle. And so the fact that we finally found a receptive partner in thinking about making a full 100% commitment on bananas and raising the prices on conventional bananas to reflect the fact that the fruit had been bought under fair trade standards and that there was a more fair distribution of value in the supply chain. That was a real milestone moment for us. In Europe, I mean, just a moment ago in the breakout room, I alluded to this. Many large retailers have made 100% commitments on fair trade. If we look at the UK, Sainsbury's and Waitrose made commitments back in 2006. You know, in Switzerland, over half bananas are fair trade. We're seeing much higher numbers in Germany. You know, 15% was the last number I had. And here in Canada, we're still at very, very low rates. And I just know that we're not going to gain market share until partners like Longo's move fair trade out of a niche and into a mainstream product. So the fact that Longo's did that was a big, big milestone for us. And I know from speaking to produce buyers since then, they've watched that, they saw that, they've really admired Longo's for their courage in doing that. And I feel that there are good things ahead. But I think that was really, it was a big moment for us.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. And yeah, I guess you can never really sit back and think we made it. You got to keep persevering and keep going on. What's next?
We're just scratching the very tip of the iceberg. You know, we have had success, but Madison Hopper, our marketing manager, has this model which Madison would be better able to explain than me. Anyway, in which we look at market segmentation, and there's some theory that if you reach 16% market share, that you have entered the mainstream, and that's what we're after. you know, we want fair trade bananas just to be the norm, to be like in the UK, where you can walk into any store and perhaps not all bananas will be fair trade, though of course that's the goal, but that you always find some fair trade offering. And we're far from that in Canada. It's getting better, but we still have miles to go before we sleep.
Yeah, true. I'll move on to question number 2. The question will be for Martin and Andreas. I'll have Andreas answer first and then Martin. Similarly, it was a long journey for Manduvira to build the business around fair trade sugar. And Martin, you spoke about that a lot when you were writing the chapter. But Andreas, first of all, when do you think was that moment when you realized you'd sort of achieved that momentum? I know it was really long journey to get there. When did you figure you had kind of reached that momentum? Or are you still working on it the same way as Equifruit?
Muchas gracias. Gracias por la pregunta. Realmente nosotros en el año 2001 empezamos a trabajar muy fuertemente con todos los productores, con más de 500 productores. Empezamos una rebelión, podríamos decir, una pequeña revolución dulce, como le llamamos, contra una empresa azucarera que estaba explotando a todos los pequeños productores. Entonces, a partir de ahí es como que nos dimos cuenta de que unidos podíamos cambiar nuestro destino, nuestro futuro, de que nosotros nos podíamos empoderarnos y realmente marcar nuestro destino, marcar nuestro futuro, y no que dependa de un empresario o el capricho de una persona. Entonces empezamos a fortalecernos y a 20 años de esto, a pesar de que ya hemos logrado varios de nuestros sueños, de lo que queríamos, el de exportar a casi 30 países, el de tener nuestra fábrica propia, podemos decir que estamos todavía en el camino, hemos avanzado mucho, pero yo creo que estamos en el 70% recién del proyecto, porque es un proyecto que busca realmente mejorar la calidad de vida, no solamente de los socios de Manduina, sino de toda la comunidad, también de todos los niños, de todos los jóvenes, de las mujeres. O sea que nosotros siempre estamos queriendo hacer más cosas. Tenemos ya nuestra fábrica de azúcar, tenemos más desafíos, tenemos más oportunidades, tenemos más retos, pero no podemos decir que ya llegamos a la meta. Hemos llegado a una parte, pero tenemos muchos más objetivos. O sea que lo que se ve, lo que es la fábrica, es solamente la punta del iceberg. Lo que no se ve es mucho más grande y nosotros vamos detrás de eso, de realmente hacer cambios muy, muy grandes en toda la comunidad, en toda la forma de pensar de la gente, en formar a jóvenes, formar el relevo generacional, hacer que los jóvenes se involucren en el trabajo del campo. Eh, hay grandes desafíos para todas las organizaciones y más para Honduras, que es una organización, una cooperativa conformada por 900 pequeños productores. Sí, Martín también. Martín conoce tanto como yo toda la historia de Mondovina y yo creo que es el único que puede presentar mejor que yo todo lo que es Mondovina.
Gracias, Andrés. Voy a contar la otra parte de la historia que no contaste desde la perspectiva de la siembra. Thanks for your question, Aaron. Yeah, so I'll tell the other side of the story, because the destinies of La Siembra and Equal Exchange and many other fair trade organizations and Manduvira has been closely tied together. Even our existence has been tied together. At La Siembra, we're known as a chocolate company by most consumers, but when you look at what's inside our products, our hot chocolate, the chocolate bars, there's sugar. There's a lot of sugar. And so everything that we convey to consumers was linked to our ability to find organic and fair trade sugar at the moment where our business started scaling, which was a huge surprise for us. We had in the early days a period of very, very strong exponential growth because we were the first ones to arrive on the market, not only with fair trade, but with organic hot chocolate. And we quickly became a conveyor belt, a partner for other fair trade organizations like Equal Exchange in the United States, Trade Aid in New Zealand, 10,000 villages at the time decided to do a co-brand. And so La Siembra was, and its team was, we were managing our brand and the products that were going into Canadian stores, and we were helping others get into that with a perspective of not doing it for them forever, but of helping them build that chain, the relationships with producers, so they could then do it themselves. And not having access to organic and fair trade sugar almost broke our business for a while. And so when we sent a team in South America looking for fair trade sugar, and we found Mandevera and other small co-ops that are partners with Mandevera now around their mill, it was a defining moment for the future of La Siembra. And it started this relationship which has been intrinsic, like I said, to everything that La Siembra has done, and as what made it possible for us to move fair trade cocoa, fair trade vanilla, cooperative almonds, and all the other products, organic skim milk powder from Canadian farmers, etc. All that is linked to the sugar of Mandevera. And so it's at that moment when we met Mandevera and we started working with them through a completely bizarre system where we needed to buy the sugar from a private mill in the village, which was not cooperative at all with us or with the producers, which was very exploitive. And it was a very difficult situation for both of us to work through that mill, very difficult, but it was the only way to start that relationship. And it was early on that Andres and the team at Mandevera told us about their objective to one day build, operate, and own their own mill, and the broader objectives that they have, which he's been talking about, which is systemic change within the community. And that was very ambitious. And I talk about it in the chapter. At the time, they had, I think, $8,000 US in their bank account. They had no control over anything except their own farms. And it seemed like a crazy project. And they were able to achieve it. You're talking about momentum. That momentum didn't come only from La Siembra. It came from all the fair trade organizations like Just Us, Equal Exchange, Etzicab in France, farmer cooperatives in Germany and Switzerland, etc., that started buying and working and becoming friends with Mandevera. And in some cases, protecting them from the colonial pressures coming from within their country and from without in the sugar industry, because we need to remember that sugar is rooted in slavery, and that despite that abolition, there was all sorts of rules, either sugar quotas, different market dynamics, and the legacy in the industry and in the land tenure for farmers, where those colonial pressures are still very much present and impacting the farmers and businesses like La Siembra, Equal Exchange, that are trying to change things at the consumer end. So that's what the momentum happened through that relationship and through us believing in their project and working with them. But it's still very fragile, because like Jenny was saying, in the banana industry, what we're doing in the sugar industry, what Mandevera is doing, is really a small portion, and all the pressures that were there before are still there. And when you get into manufacturing the way they did, you're adding risk to your business. You're adding a risk, an operational risk, not just the farming risk. There's the climate change risk that's getting bigger and bigger. There's the financial risk. There's all the complexity, and they're exposing themselves also to a financial risk, which also has colonial pressures. They have financing partners at the table that are not, that come with a set of rules that are not based on fair trade principles, and that doesn't allow them to make the systemic changes that they want to do. So there's still a fight going on. As Sean was pointing it out, fair trade is extremely complex.
Thank you, Martin. And just to follow up with you, Andreas, because obviously it took a lot of perseverance for Mandevera to achieve success in the business, but what sort of kept you motivated? Was it the fact that there were these partners that you were working with that were helping build that momentum, or what kept you motivated and hopeful throughout the process?
Y realmente ambas cosas, tanto todo el apoyo que teníamos de la gente de la siembra de Canadá, de Equal Exchange, de Just Coffee, de la gente de Bélgica, de Italia, Alemania, pero también el darnos cuenta de que nosotros podíamos cambiar desde nuestra perspectiva, desde nuestra situación difícil, desde nuestras limitaciones. Es como que ellos nos abrieron los ojos y pudimos ver de que realmente podíamos cambiar, de que no necesitábamos esperar que venga alguien más, porque nuestro mayor problema creo que hasta ahora que ocurre con nuestros productores y con nosotros mismos es que siempre esperamos que alguien va a hacer las cosas. Siempre decimos, alguien tiene que hacer esto, alguien tiene que cambiar, pero nosotros nos dimos cuenta de que no iba a haber alguien que viniera, un mesías, alguien de otro país, sino que nos dimos cuenta de que nosotros podíamos cambiar las cosas. Entonces, en vez de estar sentados esperando que venga la oportunidad a tocar la puerta, nosotros creamos las oportunidades y nos unimos y eso nos motivó, la unión, esa unión. Claro, teníamos un problema común. Yo creo que eso es lo que nos hace fuerte a las cooperativas, porque tenemos un problema común, entonces buscamos soluciones comunes que benefician a mucha gente, a muchos productores, a muchos pequeños trabajadores también que dependen de los pequeños productores. Entonces, eso nos motivó de que vimos los resultados de la unión, de que vimos los resultados de nuestro esfuerzo. Tomó un largo camino, fue un largo proceso. Estamos todavía dentro de ese proceso, pero nos motivó de que podíamos tener un futuro mejor, de que podíamos mejorar nuestra calidad de vida, de que podíamos dejar algo mejor a nuestros hijos. Entonces, esa es una motivación muy fuerte y también nos motivó el apoyo que veíamos que la gente que estaba interesada realmente en apoyar a Mandovina, los grupos de tiendas del mundo, los grupos de voluntarios, realmente las iniciativas nacionales de comercio justo también, que nos pasaron la mano, pero yo creo que el comercio justo más que la prima o el premio es que lograran despertar en nosotros esa posibilidad de soñar, esa posibilidad de cambiar nuestro futuro. Porque cuando estamos en una situación difícil, en una situación de pobreza, de miseria, de muchas limitaciones, es como que no nos permite ver más allá de esas limitaciones. Pero cuando intercambiamos opiniones también con clientes, con cooperativas, con productores de otros países, entonces es como que se nos abre una perspectiva, miramos nuestros problemas de otra perspectiva, entonces vemos realmente de que podríamos ir adelante y bueno, nos determinamos, o sea que pusimos un objetivo bien alto. Pues siempre yo recuerdo que un socio aquí en la cooperativa decía siempre, hay que mirar lejos para poder llegar lejos. Porque si uno mira solamente los dedos de los pies, hasta ahí vas a llegar. Pero entonces hay que mirar lejos, hay que mirar el horizonte para poder llegar lejos. Y siempre, Mando Dinar, siempre estamos así, siempre miramos para tratar de llegar lo más lejos posible a pesar de que haya muchas limitaciones, muchas situaciones, pero estamos siempre dispuestos a llevar adelante esta revolución dulce, como le llamamos, a lo que ocurrió aquí. Entonces, y también tratamos de inspirar a otros productores también, como para que puedan hacer, si nosotros pudimos hacer un grupo pequeño de productores, pueblo pequeño en Paraguay, perdido ahí en medio de todo el mundo. Si nosotros pudimos hacer con todas las limitaciones, yo creo que otros productores de otros productos en cualquier parte del mundo también puede lograr un cambio si es que se unen, si es que si están determinados y tienen un objetivo muy, muy claro.
Thank you so much. For Jenny, you also been a fair trade champion from the start with Equifruit. And, you know, you've always kept very positive. You're always very passionate, motivated. You seem like you're always motivated, but I'm sure there's been some hard times along the journey. So what keeps you motivated to keep persevering despite the ups and downs?
Oh my goodness. Jingles, really. We've developed a library of jingles. And we have one from this past winter when everything was going wrong. And this is really just Michelle and me and the team. And we're like, if you are unhappy with Equifruit, press 2. And our jingle was disappointed. I'm disappointed in Equifruit. Yeah. And then we laugh a little bit. And then we're like, okay, let's get that energy out of the way and let's work at finding an actual solution for whatever problem that we're facing. So I'm not saying that it's all been rainbows and unicorns. There are lots and lots of tough days, but I think there are two things. One, we have this lovely team spirit and we lift each other up and we are all committed to our mission and what we are trying to achieve. And we just know there are going to be bad days, but we believe so strongly in where we're going that we're able to overcome the tough days. But the second thing, and the really important thing, is that we have real personal relationships with our growers. And of course, this wasn't possible during the pandemic, but all you have to do is get on a plane and be reminded at origin the reason that we're doing this. You see the poverty that many small producers are living in, or the abject poverty of plantation workers. And you think about the ask here in Canada, the ask that we spend 20, 30 cents more per pound for a fruit that is already the cheapest in the basket. After fair trade will still be the cheapest fruit in the basket. You develop a kind of a rage fuel. You know, you say to yourself, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. This is such an easy problem to solve if we change people's mindsets in Canada on what a fair distribution of value should look like on this most popular fruit, the one we eat the most of in Canada. We are approached every week, all the time, by producers wanting to work with us. And we feel tremendous pressure to work to open markets for those producers. We really feel that we are the sales and marketing arm of producers who otherwise wouldn't have access to export markets on fair trade terms. And we are driven by impact. The more volume that we do here in Canada or North America, the more impact we're going to have for producers. We're really focused on changing the banana industry. And you know, as I said earlier, the ask is so small and we just are not going to rest until we've got people thinking about where their bananas have come from, who has grown them, and under what conditions. And we get to that mainstream goal. So I would say that that's, so 3 parts. 1, jingles, very important. 2, a great team. And 3, close relationships with our producers, and a reminder, a constant reminder of the impact that we can have in communities if we are successful here in Canada.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenny. And thank you, Zach. I see that you've put a question in the chat. I'll get to it in a little bit. And I encourage anyone else who has questions or comments to put them in the chat. But that was also a great segue to bring Jennifer into the conversation because, we've talked a lot about the perseverance from the producer and the commodity perspective, but you take folks to origin trips. And I'm just curious if that perseverance, that theme of perseverance, is noted by those who go to origin trips. Does that echo throughout all aspects of fair trade?
Thanks for the question, Erin. It's an interesting question because I think perseverance is something that you see or experience over time, right? It comes with feeling the challenge of the moment or what's going on. And the reality in an origin trip is that we rarely experience the challenges with producers. They may tell us some of the challenges they've been through, but more often there is an awe at what has been accomplished without really understanding the perseverance that it took to get there. So I think that the experience of the participant is one of like, oh wow, this is amazing what has happened. But not necessarily recognizing the tenacity that it took and the perseverance that it took for those individual members and those co-ops to get to that place. And so it's interesting because often people will go on one origin trip, and so you go on one origin trip and you have these experiences. I would say that for myself, though, that most of these producer groups that we visit on origin groups are groups that I've had long-term relationships with. So for me, to go back to these producer groups to see what they've been through and overcome and built and expanded upon, I can see it. So I think it's absolutely there. But I'm not sure, and maybe I'll turn the question back to you because you were a participant on the origin trip. I'm not sure that participants walk away understanding the perseverance that's required to get producer groups to where they are at when we visit them.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because, I think the answer would be different from me because I've been involved in fair trade for so long. But as you mentioned, some of the people who are attending these producer trips or origin trips maybe it's the first and only time they were exposed to fair trade. So I guess it really is hard to grasp that concept in a visit, in a 1-week visit. I'm curious, Martin, if you have some thoughts on this because you also visit producers quite a bit. What's your impression of how do people recognize that when they come to visit producers? Do they get that perseverance piece of it, I guess?
Well, I think like Jennifer's saying, it's hard in one visit to have the full picture of, have the full story. And I think it's difficult for us as Northerners with the privilege that we have and the experience that we have to get what small scale farmers experience and live every day. And if they're racialized, the types of oppression that they're fighting against as well in their different contexts. So I'd say it's very difficult. And it's one of the challenges we have in fair trade to explain that complexity, right, of that it's not just about price, and we try to convey that, but it's a much broader conversation that we're just starting to have in Canada, thanks to our First Nations communities across Canada that are forcing that conversation on colonialism, and which then becomes, I think, a personal introspection as well. So I don't think it's possible. That's why this is a long-term thing. And Andreas was saying we need to look far. He's talking about systemic change. They've been talking about systemic change at Mandavira. They're in a context where they come out of a dictatorship, one of the most brutals in the world. They've been through 2 genocides. They still speak their indigenous language because the last genocide, only the women survived. They were able to pass on their language and part of their culture. So that's the type of, when you talk of perseverance and tenacity, that's a lot. And there's trauma in that. It's not just tenacity, right? There's also producers are faced with a lot of trauma that's been carried from generation to generation, civil wars, all sorts of different contexts. And so that's really difficult to convey to consumers. And consumers, we want them to have a positive make a positive gesture. Buy fair trade banana, buy fair trade sugar. And that's not a good selling feature to talk about trauma or, right? And so this forum is super important because we can bring that to the table. It's not in our marketing that we can do that. This needs to happen in our schools. It needs to happen in our communities, in our churches, and equal exchange with their interfaith program. We're able to do that, and this is some of the things that Villages was able to do, right? 10,000 villages, and that CFTN does. Because it's so deep and so important to have that conversation. And then we need to talk also, it's not just, you were talking about reconciliation, and we always forget the word reparation. And I think in sugar, that's super important. Again, the roots of slavery, we can't just say it's a fair game now, and it's not a fair game. I was looking, for example, consumers here will buy maple sugar at $76 a kg at IGA, right? Sugar sells for $1 a pound, right? So let's just think about that, the unfairness. We're willing to pay our producers, $76 a kg, right? So 45 bucks a pound or whatever that is, or 35 bucks a pound. And the price for conventional sugar is, or even organic sugar, is 35 times less. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, good points, Martin. I'm going to come back to you, Jennifer, on Zach's question, actually, because I think the impact that the pandemic has had has affected everything, and obviously has severely affected the opportunity to travel and to go to origin trips. How do you think that is going to, I guess now that we're kind of over it, I don't know what impact it's had to you and your business and how you've done things, or maybe you can just comment on what the future might look like.
Yeah, so of course, origin trips came to a grinding halt when COVID hit, and for me, the travel in a world that is, well, with climate change is a difficult one. So, but to me, the real question is then, how do you maintain those connections, right? Like Jenny spoke about the value of hopping on a plane and going to visit your producer. So you're motivated by their realities to be their sales and marketing arm in Canada. And I think, in the origin trips, we focused on bringing institutions and buyers and people to origin who have purchasing decisions in ways that can have a real impact for fair trade. So for me, obviously that's been a difficult thing to do throughout the pandemic. So, we haven't had conferences, we haven't had origin trips. There's been all sorts of ways that we've become disconnected. And so the risk to me is that we lose that golden thread of the value of fair trade, because we're now severed from those relationships of people that we're ultimately connected with every single day when we drink a cup of coffee or make a banana bread. And so I think I think we're all feeling disconnected in all sorts of ways. And so I think the question is, coming out of the pandemic as a movement, how do we rebuild those relationships so that we can continue to build that momentum, so we can continue to ensure that that Canadians are spending the extra cents required to support producers, small scale producers that are growing fair trade. So there's definitely some work to be done to rebuild that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jennifer. I'm curious as well, Andreas, how did the pandemic affect the producers at Manduvira? And is it a matter of trying to recover from that now, or were you able to find a way to stay, as active as you'd like to be?
Realmente la pandemia afectó en cierta forma nuestras actividades, pero como nuestra actividad principal es la de producir alimentos, estábamos exceptuados. O sea que a pesar de la estricta cuarentena que aquí se declaró obligatorio para todos, a nosotros nos permitían, podíamos trabajar. Como el trabajo era al aire libre en el campo, entonces este, nosotros un año antes de la pandemia habíamos hecho una planificación muy buena, muy interesante, y habíamos dicho que el año 2020 iba a ser nuestro mejor año. Claro, eso fue en diciembre de 2019 y empezamos a trabajar, a planificar, a reunirnos con los socios porque queríamos que ese año 2020 sea lo mejor. Bueno, en marzo, el 10 de marzo aquí en Paraguay se cierra todo y es como que todos los planes, toda esa organización es como que parecía que iba a quedar sin efecto. Pero igual nosotros seguimos trabajando, claro, tomando todas las medidas, todos los cuidados, eh, porque aquí en nuestro país no, como en la mayor parte del mundo también, pero aquí no había, no había medicamentos, no había cama en los hospitales, o sea que una situación bastante delicada. Pero igual nosotros ese año 2020 fue nuestro mejor año, nuestro mejor año, porque realmente como que nos concentramos en el trabajo, tratamos de concentrarnos en el trabajo con todos los problemas que había en todo el mundo. Y hasta ahora podemos decir que fue nuestro maíz. Crecimos casi 45% en plena pandemia en nuestra producción, en lo que es la producción industrial, la producción de azúcar. Eh, Durante la primera etapa, cuando la cuarentena era muy fuerte, eh, tuvimos que recurrir a todo lo que significa una cooperativa que yo creo que lo principal es la solidaridad. Este, Solicitamos para que movimiento de comercio justo nos pueda autorizar, por ejemplo, para utilizar los fondos de comercio justo para la compra de alimentos. Y estuvimos haciendo llegar alimentos para 4.000 personas, entre productores, trabajadores del campo. Durante 2 meses hicimos llegar alimentos y víveres para poder sobrellevar. O sea que en los primeros meses, cuando era todo muy difícil. Aparte también todos los cuidados, todos los cuidados higiénicos, o sea, los insumos. Acá los hospitales, los centros de salud no tenían tapabocas, no tenían alcohol. Entonces, nosotros con nuestra gente desarrollamos eso. Hicimos la mezcla de alcohol como para que llegue a toda la gente, para que pueda cuidarse. Y, y realmente nos ha afectado porque también la pandemia se unió aquí con un problema de cambio climático muy fuerte. Tuvimos una sequía muy fuerte ya desde hace 3 años hasta ahora. Ahora sí está empezando a llover. Entonces nos ha afectado mucho porque eh, la pandemia vino y es como que ya pasó, pero las consecuencias, o sea, que todo el problema de logística, la crisis de contenedores en todo el mundo. Y nosotros en Paraguay no tenemos puertos sobre el mar, entonces tenemos que sacar nuestras cargas, nuestros contenedores, tenemos que sacar por el río Paraguay hasta Buenos Aires, hasta Montevideo. Entonces son como 3 años que hay poca agua porque no llueve muy poco. Entonces es un conjunto de muchas situaciones que como que nos ha ayudado, o sea que la pandemia también puso al máximo, nos puso una prueba muy fuerte. Y es como que hemos desarrollado también, en la medida que hay un obstáculo, uno se vuelve más fuerte para tratar de sortear o tratar de pasar por ese obstáculo. Y al final la pandemia nos hizo eso, o sea, nos hizo más fuertes como para tratar de sobrellevar todos los problemas. O sea, que de hecho que es como que para los pequeños productores siempre hay muchas oportunidades, podemos decir que muchos problemas, pero nosotros llamamos oportunidades a los problemas que tenemos. Entonces, es como que tratamos de ver en cada crisis hay siempre una oportunidad. Eso aprendimos con Martín también, de que tratamos de ser positivos y le decimos, bueno, tenemos, en vez si tengo un gran problema, decimos siempre, tengo una gran oportunidad. Y así seguimos adelante. Eh, y ahora creo que después de la pandemia la situación es peor porque viene la crisis económica. Aquí en nuestro país el combustible ha subido 90%, entonces eso ha golpeado bastante. Este, y también la crisis a nivel mundial, la crisis económica, nuestro mayor mercado era Europa, o sea, es Europa. Entonces la caída del euro ante el dólar también nos ha afectado mucho a nuestros clientes y claro, también directamente a nosotros. Pero hemos aprendido a acumular, tenemos mucha resiliencia acumulada, como decimos aquí. Creo que no existe esa palabra en psicología, pero nosotros acumulamos resiliencia, acumulamos resistencia como para ir enfrentando las situaciones difíciles y tratar de salir adelante a pesar del cambio climático, a pesar de la pandemia y a pesar de los obstáculos que siempre se nos han presentado y que ahora también se nos siguen presentando.
Thank you. Yeah, I love reframing the problem into opportunity. That's the way we get through, and very, very good to hear that. It seems like the fair trade system did provide a bit of insulation where you could pull from the funds to help those that needed it. I guess also Jenny, despite the fact that the pandemic was occurring, it seemed like Equifru managed to achieve quite a few milestones. And so I'm just curious, did it affect you, or did you find it a way to create an opportunity out of a problem?
Well, there's affecting us and there's affecting our producers, right? I mean, we worked from home before, and so we were lucky to sit at our desks in offices in Canada and not have to worry about catching COVID while we were working. Our producers kept on pumping out bananas, and right away, demand went up in those first few months of panic buying. And boy, we got the fruit we asked for. It was really astonishing, but it wasn't without difficulty. In both of our co-ops of small producers in Ecuador and Peru, there are members who passed away during COVID. Some of them were older members. They're people no matter their age. So that was, hard to, or good reminder of the privilege of those of us who are non-essential workers, essentially. From a market perspective, from an Equifruit perspective, well, first of all, demand went up, but also we used the time that we would have spent on the road or doing trade shows and so on, investing in a rebrand for our company a new website and packaging and all sort of touch points, consumer or buyer touch points to our brand, we gave a big rethink to. And that new messaging has had a really incredible impact on our sales. I think that is what was one of the motivators to Longo's to think about doing this switch. They realized that together we were going to be able to communicate to their guests at point of sale in a way that was upbeat and fun, all the while supporting the fair trade message. So the lockdown in the end gave us the chance to invest in this project where we had been very haphazard until then. We built our own website, and we're using Canva to design our business cards and cases and everything else. And we worked with this creative agency, and we just did this in a much more strategic way throughout the pandemic. So
great. Yeah, thank you. So, we've been having such a great conversation, but I do have to start winding it down so that we will have time for a little bit of trivia at the end. So I'm going to ask each speaker just in 3 minutes each, if you could just share a final takeaway, maybe an action that you would like our audience to consider taking to help either build a better relationship as a northern consumer, as a southern producer, or something that can help us keep building the fair trade movement. And I'll start with Martin.
Thank you, Erin. Well, I think, of course, purchasing fair trade products and continue to doing so. But I'll go back to what I was saying earlier, I think, and thinking of our position of privilege as Northerners, and thinking of the changes we need to make. I think a lot of what we're seeing in the ecological and social transition are very linked with fair trade, right? We need to start thinking as a species. The changes we need to make are systemic. They're at the planetary level. One of your questions that we don't have time for was what impresses me most when I meet producers. Well, I think it's the work that they're doing to make that systemic change, political, socially, but at the environmental level as well, the commitment they have towards organic agriculture, towards taking care of the planet. It's the change we need. And things are a little bit upside down, that it's these people that are often highly impoverished, working in really difficult conditions with the system working against them, inheriting a colonial system which is still pressuring them, that are doing this work and that are not getting paid for it. While our choice is between changing our gas car to an electric car, and we're weighing that, and we're going to do it this year, is there enough subsidies? So I think what I'd ask consumers to do is to start looking at that perspective, start asking themselves those hard questions from a personal perspective, and seeing what are the changes that we can make. And definitely paying a bit more for your bananas, while it's still going to be the cheapest fruit in the basket, like Jenny was saying, or for your chocolate, for your coffee, for your cotton. Start looking at the clothes we wear, where that's coming from as well. I think that's super important. And start realizing that we can't have a romantic vision of that. There's an urgency right now to do that. The producers are there, they're doing that work. They're really doing it in a way that's very radical, and they're asking us to do it, really. And it's not a question of charity. We're at a point now where we need to do it together. We need to hold hands. It's extremely serious, and we need to start having these conversations at the table that are sometimes uncomfortable, if we want to make that change happen. That's what I would tell consumers.
Thank you, Martin. I'll ask Andres the same question. Can you share one action that you would like our audience to take to support fair trade?
Sí, así es. Gracias, Erin. Nosotros estamos muy comprometidos con el ambiente y entendemos, ¿verdad?, de que los pequeños productores somos los que estamos más expuestos y somos los que sufrimos más por todo lo que implica el cambio climático. Cuando hay un problema de sequía, cuando hay inundación, cuando hay un huracán, miles de familias somos afectadas. Pero eso a veces sale un día en la noticia, en la televisión, en los medios de prensa y pasa. A veces 1 minuto, 2 minutos y como que ya termina, pero eso en la vida del productor tarda 1 año en recuperarse. O sea que eso significa que perdió toda su cosecha, que no tiene dinero para seguir pagando la escuela, el colegio de los hijos. O sea que realmente necesitamos que haya una justicia climática. No hablamos mucho de cambio climático, es cierto, pero está muy asociado con los pequeños productores, porque realmente estamos con una situación eh, de que estamos muy vulnerables a todo el impacto del cambio climático y los planes tanto de mitigación o de adaptación llevan su tiempo. Sin embargo, eh, necesitamos más apoyo para poder realmente que haya una justicia climática, así como nosotros somos los que más estamos aportando para tratar de que nuestro planeta sea, de producir en forma sana, en forma orgánica y de cuidar nuestro planeta, de que también los recursos puedan alcanzar, y que no se queden en los países que más contaminan. O sea que realmente estamos nosotros en esa postura porque vemos que cada día los cambios son impredecibles y más variables. Sabemos que siempre hizo calor o siempre hizo frío, pero ahora 3 años de sequía o varios años de inundación en lugares que no era común eso, hace que realmente vemos que necesitamos más conciencia de cada uno de esos lugares, cada uno en su. Ustedes en el norte, nosotros en el sur, de hacer esfuerzos para que realmente se pueda cambiar. Y como comercio justo, o sea que yendo a lo que es nuestro producto, bueno, nosotros entendemos de que hay como una especie de demonización también de lo que es el azúcar, eh, como que el azúcar es la culpable de todos los problemas de salud que existen en el mundo. Sin embargo, vemos que los edulcorantes que son sintéticos dañan mucho más a la salud de las personas. Pero es como una moda realmente. Sin embargo, un producto sano, un producto que realmente tiene impacto en la vida de miles de familias, eh, esperamos que sigan siempre apoyando. Porque al final el consumidor es el que tiene todo el poder. El consumidor puede cambiar con una simple acción, cuál es la acción de comprar o no comprar un producto y mirar el origen de ese producto, de qué empresa está vendiendo, de dónde está trayendo. Entonces, eh, realmente estamos muy contentos con que tengamos personas como ustedes que siempre están tratando de que realmente llegue a los consumidores nuestro trabajo, nuestra historia y también nuestros ánimos de ir superándonos, de tratar de dejar un mejor futuro a nuestros niños y a nuestros jóvenes y nosotros tratar de hacer algo mejor, dejar un mejor legado para ellos.
Thank you. Jennifer?
I think the ask is that we all show up each day with the things that we're consuming and remember that there's a connection with someone who grew that item, who processed it, who packaged it, who transported it. It's so simple to just, open your fridge and not think about where things came from. But I had the joy of visiting some of our organic producers last week, and that constant reminder and reminding yourself and the gratitude for like the work that other people put into the things that you consume on a daily basis. I think if we can keep that, if we can remind ourselves of that from time to time, then we'll make the choices that support the sustainability that we need moving forward.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. And Jenny?
I think that our our big challenge is finding an audience for our message outside of our silos. You know, I mean, I'm happy that all of us who are on this webinar today are here, but we all have, from what I can see of your names and those of you I know, some connection to fair trade or an interest in social justice or trade justice movements. Really, what we need to do is find audiences that aren't exposed to this message, that don't know the first thing about fair trade. We have so much to do to get, you know, your average Canadian at a spot where they recognize the fair trade mark or SPP or the concept of fair trade and are going to be on board with this mission that we all here feel so strongly about. We really have to think about how we can break out of our choir and sing to other audiences too. I think that's the main thing. So if you've you know, if you see an opportunity to speak or a media source to talk to who are not, you know, our normal partners, then we have to do that. We have to, each of us, think about how we can reach more people outside our fair trade bubble.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point, Jenny. We have to get the word out to those who aren't converted yet. So thank you everyone for being a part of this panel. I do want to make sure that we finish on time, but we have kind of a fun activity where I'm going to post a couple of questions in the chat, multiple choice questions, so they're pretty easy. And feel free to type your answer in the chat because I'm curious to know if people know the answer, or some of this might be, you know, pretty straightforward for some longtime fair traders, and some of this might be totally out of their normal knowledge. So this is a chance to learn a little bit more. So feel free to type your guess in the chat. And people who should know and don't know, no, I'm just joking. Well, Sean, of course you know it. You shouldn't have guessed. That's okay. So Sean has the correct answer. C is the correct answer. Thank you. I'll put my next question in. This might be a tricky question. Oh, can everybody see the question? Just one sec. Yes, that's right. One sec here. That's a tricky thing for me to manage chats and stuff at the same time. Okay. So feel free to put your guess or answer in the chat. People are getting the hang of it. Yep, that was all of the above, which might surprise some people that, you know, you can find ice cream as fair trade, there you can find facial scrubs and skin products, you can find chocolate, which is a composite product. So all of those can be found as fair trade. Here is a third question. And yeah, the correct answer is actually UBC. So, but everyone listed on here is a fair trade campus, I believe. So, which congratulations to them, because that's a lot of work. And this is for the fact that we just celebrated our Truth and Reconciliation Day, and we had a chapter in section 2 about this fair trade coffee brand. So should be easy if you've read the book. Oh yeah, everybody knows this one. So that's awesome. If you haven't already tried Birch Bark Coffee, it's an amazing product, and they contribute towards clean water projects in Indigenous nations that are still trying to achieve that, which is kind of scary when you think of Canada as a first world country that doesn't have clean water in some of our communities. And then my last bonus question, because I tried to find out what Manduvira, what the significance of Manduvira is. And if anyone, bonus question, if you know what the meaning of Manduvira is, you can type it in the chat, or else I will also get Andreas to explain it to us. Why don't you go ahead, Andreas, and tell us about what Manduvira signifies?
Manduvina es una planta, es un árbol que crece casi siempre cerca de los cursos de agua, cerca de los ríos, de los arroyos. Entonces este árbol es muy resistente. Cuando viene una creciente del agua, a veces este árbol queda varios meses, 4, 5, 6 meses, queda bajo agua. O también cuando hay mucha sequía, cuando no llueve más, el árbol es muy resistente. Y cuando sale después de 6 meses debajo del agua, el árbol se vuelve más fuerte todavía. Entonces nosotros nos inspiramos en esa planta y somos así. También los problemas a veces es como nos tienen muy, como situaciones muy difíciles como el agua que nos cubre todo, pero siempre salimos otra vez más fuertes todavía. Entonces, de ahí tomamos el nombre de la cooperativa Manduina.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought that was really great because I was trying to find a good translation of Manduvira, and yeah, I thought it meant something else, but I really love that analogy of the tree and that it perseveres even throughout lack of water. So I did do a quick draw ahead of the session, a random draw, and the winner of a Fair Trade Handbook is Brad Crass. So Brad, if you are on the call, I will be emailing you to get your contact information, because you'll get a free copy of the book to either keep or give away. I noticed that we're at 1 minute over time, so I want to thank everyone who attended, who participated. Thank you to SPP, who did such amazing work in the translation and helping us use the Zoom call and the technology behind the scenes. So thank you so much. It's so amazing to have amazing partners like SPP, like all of the partners, the authors of this book, everyone who is part of the fair trade movement, working so hard to make things better and to talk about, have conversations that are maybe not always the easiest conversations to have, but we need to keep having them. So thank you all, and I wish you a good rest of your day, and stay tuned because we will post the video of this session so that other people can view it. So please feel free to pass it on to your networks as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Erin, for organizing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for the facilitation,
everybody.
Mary.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks, Erin.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Adios.
Súper
Ciao,
bien,
ciao.
muy bien.
Au revoir.
Adios.
Hasta luego.